Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Repackaging Revolution podcast. I'm your host, David Marinac. Now, before we get to our guests, I'd like to share the name of today's show, Unboxing Creativity, Graphic Design and Packaging, and more. Now, today's guest is someone I've admired from afar for a long time. She speaks our language. From her LinkedIn profile, you'll love this, folks. We have a lot of packaging folks that listen. Today's consumer has a very short attention span, and it's getting shorter. To be seen and build brand loyalty, your marketing message needs to be instantly bold, colorful, attractive, and compelling. It requires emotion to engage the consumer at the retail shelf level and at home and on digital devices. You have 8 seconds to attract the customer. Every second counts. Now, for over 25 years, our guest has worked to elevate brands in the marketplace, attract new customers, and ultimately sell more stuff. Vicki Strull, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today.
I love just being able to talk to colleagues in this space, and I know we've got some meaty chunks to discuss what you do now in Vicki Strull Consulting and Vicki Strull Design and all the other kind of things. But take us back to the early years. What got you into? Are you from the East Coast? Because I saw that you went to the University of Pennsylvania. Are you an East Coast gal?
I'm not. In fact, I go places and people cannot believe where I'm from. I've been at I do some speaking also. I was at a conference once and someone said to me, are you from, where are you from? And I said, where do you think I'm from? And there were about 6 of us around a high top table. And someone said Canada, someone said New York, someone said Pennsylvania, someone said California, somebody said Florida, but no one said Kentucky. And I am from Louisville, Kentucky.
Is that right? I totally thought this was going to be a Philadelphia gal. Our son looked at the University of Pennsylvania. I loved that school. It's something right out of what is it? Harry Potter. I just remember. I mean, just the architecture and the whole bit felt like it was Hogwarts all over again.
Well, it's the oldest university. It's been Franklin, so that's what you.
I just absolutely loved it. But I never thought Kentucky. How about that? Interesting. Yeah. That's a very, very. I've spent a lot of time more so in Lexington, Louisville, not so much, just passing through, but again, lots happening down that area.
Yes, a lot happening. And so I grew up in Louisville. We from Louisville say Louisville. Although I often say Louisville as well, depending on the company I'm with. I went to University of Pennsylvania.
Yep.
I did not study design in college.
Love it.
I was in Wharton for a time. I studied history. I finished college in 3 years.
Yeah, I saw that.
So you have kids, I have kids, and think about this. I finished college and I was not even 21.
Wow.
It's pretty like now that I have kids that are, in that range.
Us too.
I go, oh my God.
I know.
So at that point,
did you go out? Did you date? Did you have friends? Because 3 years is hardcore. That's crazy.
Yeah. I actually met my husband at 10.
That's awesome. Good for you.
I did. And we've been married 29 years. I point because his home office is over here. He's not working here today. But
we are 29 years as well. 30 is coming up. I love it.
30 is coming up.
Very cool.
When I finished college, you can imagine I didn't know what to do. I mean, I just didn't. I was scheduled to go to law school at Emory. And I decided to defer it. And I have this quality about me that I don't always recognize, but in hindsight, I do. It's this quality of being so naive. You do something bold, not even knowing how bold it is because you're that naive.
Right.
And I called 30 creative directors in Atlanta, because Emory was in Atlanta. So I thought, okay, well, I'll still move to Atlanta, but I would like to call ad agencies. And I called creative directors in Atlanta and asked them where they hired from. And they all hired from this one trade school called the Portfolio Center. and now it's part of Miami Ad School. So I went to the Portfolio Center. When I finished, I got a job right out of school at a design agency in Dalton, Georgia,
Huh.
which is the carpet capital of the world
Yeah,
because
I was gonna
tufting
say.
was
Yep.
invented there.
Yep.
And I worked there for a couple of years until the firm itself imploded. They went out of business. And I was doing the work of Kerosene Carpets and Rugs, and I was doing all of their work. And so their head of marketing said, will you continue doing our work? So you can imagine I was about 26 years old. And I said, sure.
Yeah.
And this is how I go into business for myself.
I was just going to say.
At the same time, I was doing work for Interface. When I was at the design firm, I was doing work for Interface flooring systems. And the CEO there was very nice. And he and I hit it off. And I also hit it off with his executive assistant. And interestingly, I always recognize how important executive assistants are. Mainly they're women. I'm a woman. I was young. They were usually older than I. And to me, they were always the gatekeepers.
Yep.
And I can't tell you how many times I've been to a meeting and I'm with people, generally if they're men, and they don't give the executive assistant the time of day.
I know.
And I always did.
Yep.
So she and I stayed in touch. This is where this comes full circle. That CEO eventually, about 10 years ago, at some point was on the board of WS Packaging and then became their CEO. And he asked me to be their executive creative director when he rotated in to be their CEO, which of course is packaging. And that was, say, 25 years later. I mean,
that's
it's just
crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
How that works. And he and I are still in touch. So, yeah.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, and sort of, so that's where this whole thing started, because I saw on LinkedIn, that's sort of as this has gone through. And I know you've done some speaking, as you mentioned, and Tulane, you're an adjunct professor.
Yes.
Tell us how a little bit more about all those other pieces that are part of your profile.
Sure.
The speaking, the Tulane.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting. One of the things that I noticed in my career, and I don't know if you're familiar with the 10,000 hour rule that Malcolm Gladwell wrote about.
Love it. Yep.
So it was interesting. You take 10,000 hours and you take my early years, right? So these are formative years until I'm about 25, and it's all pretty much academic.
Sure.
Then I go to design school when I shouldn't say 25, 22. I go to design school, and then I focus on just design. There's a point in time where I'm working for myself and I start to get a higher seat at the table, like a seat at the higher table, right?
Yeah, right.
And people start saying to me, you're not like any graphic designer I've ever met. And it's because of all of those formative years.
Yep.
And the classes I took at Wharton, and I live with a Wharton grad. I mean, my husband is. So all of that business, just through osmosis and some study, goes into me, so that when I'm having a conversation about design, for me, it naturally goes back to business. So what are you trying to achieve in your business? What's the goal, and so on?
Yep.
Okay. So that's part of this, all of these other pieces. The part with the speaking, I'm the type of person that leans in. I always think that work begets work. So if you want to do a particular type of work, you actually have to lean into that type of work, and it begets more work.
Sure.
In the speaking arena, I had this very unique convergence of understanding design, having clients that are brands, understanding production, having worked at WS Packaging fractionally for a couple of years, understanding the converters. And conferences started to ask me to talk about that, just talk about and help converters understand the design process and what brands want. It was almost like a language that they weren't understanding. And I couldn't understand why they weren't understanding it, because it was so natural for me.
Right. And
then I just leaned in. They wanted more. I did more. And apparently I was pretty good at it. So people kept asking, and I still do it. So
I love it.
now I do it on behalf of other companies. So other companies will ask me to speak on behalf of them, which I think is an interesting, I call it diversified revenue streams. It's an interesting revenue stream.
Well, and what a gift too, because for you to be able to kind of share what you've been able to kind of have in your back pocket and get paid for it, let's face it, and be able to kind of do something that kind of keeps you really engaged in a bunch of different facets of the industry. Good for you. I think that's fantastic.
Thank you. Well, and then the LinkedIn. So I started to develop this LinkedIn following because they're very engaged. So it feeds on itself. They're engaged. So I write a little more. They're more engaged. I write a little more. It's so, a couple of years later, you go from, 1,000 followers to, over 10,000, like in a couple of years. It's just that kind of thing. And you just kind of lean into it.
Well, the other thing too, and respect, and I'm not blowing smoke at you. The one thing that's nice about what you do on LinkedIn is you actually give a lot of good information away. You are not promoting, hey, look at me and what I just did for Smuckers, or what I just put together. I'm like, it's like it's painful what a lot of people use LinkedIn for, but you can also accomplish that and more by just sharing your knowledge and sharing your insights. And that's why you've got those, including me. I mean, and that's what's cool, is that you're not out there patting yourself on the back. You're actually giving good information away, which is rare.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. Thank you. I also understand that social media, it's really, for people that don't have a social media strategy, if you want a social media strategy, here's the strategy: 85% giving, 15% asking. That's it. Any more asking, and it's exactly what you just said.
Right.
People just tune it out, because social media is about connection and building community, which is what you're doing here on this podcast. That's what social media is for.
Yeah, and that's when we talked earlier about these little nuggets that come out of that. That 85% and 15 is a nugget right there, because social media is so misunderstood, and I can see it from a distance, and especially B2B. I mean, B2C, you can almost I give people a break because it's consumers and maybe they don't know any better or whatever. But B2B, and talking about, we just put our new factory in here and I just took over, like blah, 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 like good night. I mean, crazy.
Yeah.
Well, let's dig in a little bit about what you do in your space, your world, in the whole design graphics. How does somebody work with you? Is there a target client? Are you kind of, a lot of times, and I can imagine, and I just don't want to guess, but having your background and doing so many different things, I would imagine a lot of companies are reaching out to you saying, "Hey, Vicki, we need some help with this," or "Hey," or are you actively looking for new clients and new projects or whatever? Tell us a little bit more about the whole consulting world.
Okay, sure. So first, I'll say I'm always looking for new clients.
Okay, good for you.
Just how business is.
Yep.
I've been very fortunate where it's word of mouth for me. Yep. So I haven't had to go out and really sell. I would say that selling to acquire business, top of the funnel, would be a weakness for me. When you talk about strengths and weaknesses, top of the funnel is my weakness. I don't like doing it. I don't have confidence in it. And I would rather be designing. And one of my sweet spots, when you talk about it, there's a lot of different ways you can describe it. One of them is, I have said to people, you get me in the room and I can do the job. I have trouble getting into the room. Okay. But you get me there, I can get us in. I can keep the clients. I can keep them for several years.
Yep.
But you've got to get me into the room. I'm very collaborative.
Right.
I think about design as a partnership. So I do creative direction. So sometimes I'm doing creative direction for a company where they need some consulting, and there might be some design pen to paper, what I call pen to paper work. There might be some design work on it, but it's also might be consulting. Hey, did you check this? Are you sure the positioning matches this? How clearly have you defined your audience? Sometimes I'm doing that with like a small company CEO, could be the CMO. It's something like that. Typically, when I'm doing that kind of work, I'm also doing some design work where it could be I'm actually designing packaging,
right,
or I'm doing some brand identity design. And brand identity design is the foundation of what every brand needs.
Of course.
Just for the story and the messaging and the consistent typography and so on. Creative direction is a layer above that to ensure that all of their branding is cohesive and consistent, because there's power in that cohesion.
Yep. And I see a lot of that disjointedness that companies are sort of, well, from my world of the packaging side of things too, which I know you can relate to, a lot of companies, and these are big companies too, Vicki, think of it at the last minute. Just ship it. And then they wonder why it falls flat at the retail level, or people don't understand, well, our product is better than the other one. Yeah, but you haven't communicated that. And nobody knows that. And so often in my world of custom packaging and specialized packaging is trying to really emphasize, use the available real estate, use what tools you have to explain why your product is so good, long lasting, better tasting, whatever it is. But so many people are like, just ship it. You know, we're already late. And I like, it's the nails across the chalkboard. It drives me crazy.
I know. I even say that a brand's packaging is their most important touch point.
Thank you.
Across the board, they've got all these other touch points. You've got websites, you've got digital marketing, you've got social media, you've got maybe direct mail, you've got e-blast, whatever it is. That packaging, it's their most important touch point.
It's the voice of their brand. It is the voice of their brand. And I often follow that up with what's your brand saying?
Yeah.
You know, and oftentimes it's really, it sounds catchy, but I mean, it's really kind of, it's like, that'll tell you a lot about what their values are, what they think of, you know, where they're selling their product. And, you know, I'm just amazed because like you, I'm a consumer. When I get products and I look at the packaging or the, you know, the freezer burn or whatever on the fresh vegetables that were supposed to be fresh kind of thing, all this stuff is like, boy, you guys just lost me on that one. I don't get it, you know, and, you know, in packaging, and we were talking offline, packaging to me is this unsung hero, like you mentioned before. It's so important. And I'm so adamant to try to encourage people. I know we've got the Michigan States and the Clemsons and the packaging design and packaging engineering, I should say. But oftentimes from the packaging engineering space, I don't know if you've seen this, but they're also the first to get lopped off. You know, I've seen it at these big firms. They bring in 4 or 5 packaging engineers and they're doing this, they're doing that. And pretty soon when the economy gets tight or whatever it is, they lop those guys off because they're not making chump change. And then they sort of like, I don't know. And I just, there's a real need out here. It seems like over the last 20, 25 years in this space, companies have sort of just gone, we've gotten so lazy with the U lines and Granger, but specialized packaging is just that. It's specialized. You're not going to find it on Granger. You're not going to get it at U-line because it has to be designed. It has to be tested and sampled. And there's just this mounting gap that just is like, man, we've got to bring that closer together because companies need that. And they're really at the mercy of their packaging. And if the packaging doesn't show up on time or isn't done properly or hasn't been qualified enough, these companies could lose hundreds of millions of dollars. It's crazy. I hope you like this content. If you want more of it, I put together a specialized packaging alliance, a group of packaging professionals that are in different facets of this industry. We have webinars, we have meetings, The idea is to share information about this great industry of packaging, whether that be from the sales side of things to the marketing, even to the end users. My point with this is I'd love to have you join us, the Specialized Packaging Alliance. Check out the link below to learn more. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I always think about design as a strategy. I mean, I call myself a design strategist because to me, the most successful companies, and there's research out there that supports this,
Right.
are those that use design strategically. They're
Yep.
using it as a business strategy to grow the business. And whether
Yep.
that's design of the structure,
Yep.
design of their supply chain, design of their brand, the designful company is the most successful company.
Agreed.
I mean, they're outperforming. Look at Apple. They're outperforming
Yep.
because they're so design oriented.
Big time.
Throughout,
Everything.
their employees are more productive because they're design focused. So it's one of those things that it always confounds me as well, because I can't figure out how people aren't using that to their advantage. They're not leveraging it, and they should be. So it's why I'm always talking about design strategy. It's not just design, it's design strategy. Where are you trying to take the brand? What are you trying to do? It's so interesting to me that people aren't using this.
Well, especially, and you brought up something that really got me going here too, is I remember when Method soap came out, and here's this liquid soap in a pouch. Are you kidding me? What? Wait, whoa, hold on 1 second. But for every one of those Method soaps, which by the way, then was bought out by Unilever at 40 times what they probably should have gotten, or whatever it was based upon their financials. But there's a packaging guy like me out here going, wouldn't you want to be another Method soap? No, we're just going to keep it the same. Well, everybody else is packaged in a bar and everybody else is there in a rigid container. So we're going to, what? Do you want to just be a Me Too? Or it's crazy.
It is. There's a lot of Me Too brands out there. It's part of what I look at whenever I'm designing for somebody. I'm always looking at the competition so that they're not a Me Too. Right. I mean, I did a rebrand for a company a couple of years ago. They're a specialty food company. And when they came to me, they looked very generic and they were premium. They were high end. Their flagship product was olive oil, and they were selling for about $30 for 500 ml. Wow. And it looked very generic, and it certainly didn't look premium. And I rebranded them. There's nothing that looks like them on the shelf. Still today, there's nothing that looks like them on the shelf. That was the point. When he asked me, the CEO came to me and he asked me how I could help. And I said to him, I did a little research, and I said to him, okay, so there's two things. And I said, at one time, was the strategy to sell this online? And he said, yes. And I said, but you're not selling online. He said, no, we switched to retail. And I said, did anybody tell the agency? And because it wasn't really designed for retail. And I said, because your agency that you had used, they've never designed for retail. They've done some beautiful packaging, but they've never designed for retail. And they got your audience wrong. I don't know 25-year-olds that are buying olive oil for $30. I have a child in college. They're not spending that on olive oil because I'm paying the bills. And if they were, I'm not paying that bill. So
Right. You know, it's another good point with that too, is I just see so oftentimes from our target customers. I mean, yes, I love, and we've worked with Cisco's and we've done some work with the big boys, but our targets have always been that medium, large company. And what interests me, to your point, is that a lot of these people, I digress. Let me step back. When I got into this space, I remember that the buyers of the world, of the Hoover Company and Moen Faucets, they held a lot of weight. They were the ones that directed everything from new design to where the stuff was sourced and all these kind of things. And it seems like we've replaced a lot, or they've replaced a lot of them with the clerk, Betty the buyer, Bob the buyer clerk, who's really just not a buyer, just basically following what the computer says to do. And oftentimes I've got customers, or I see customers, back to your olive oil, and they're using substandard packaging, or they're just a me too, like we talked with Method Soap, or not a Method Soap, but example with Method Soap. And I'll ask them, why are you doing this? Well, that's what everybody else is doing. And we just assumed that we would have to buy millions to be able to compete at that level. And I'm bringing this full circle here on my end, is that there are global suppliers that don't necessarily have to run millions of pieces. Yes, there are companies, not just global, but there are suppliers who are willing to run small to medium-sized runs because they ultimately want your business for a long time. And so many of these companies I look at, the big thing for me, there's a local company here in Cleveland called Cleveland Kraut, and bigger brand now for sauerkraut and kimchi and things, and they've taken their brand into a pouch, in the pouch with a vented outgassing valve, which is brilliant. Love it. But when I found that company here locally and some connections, they are being forced by whoever their supplier is to run millions, sit on that. They're not, some of these big brands. And I'm like, did you look anywhere else? No, we just figured that's just what we'll just do what everybody, and I'm just, anyhow, it just drives me nuts. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of, there's an opportunity out here that to compete with those brands that want to get to the next level. You don't necessarily have to throw out millions of dollars and then sit on it for the next 6 years because you want to, there's just lots of different things that are out there.
Well, and it surprises me because that's cash flow. I mean, that's a big problem. So
I know.
Like when you and I talk about, okay, design and what is the business, that's cash flow.
Yep, big time.
It's mind-boggling to me. And I think some of it is, I think maybe brands, maybe they don't know. Maybe they don't have the experts. I mean, they don't have you or they don't have me to know where to look, but that they should be calling us. I mean, we are experts in that.
You're exactly right, which bringing this together is why I like to do this, because look, let's face it, people are searching online occasionally, or I want them to have every piece of me out there trying to encourage them, just like you do on LinkedIn, trying to encourage them. You can do this. You don't have to, you can compete with the big boys without breaking the bank. And even though your supplier is X, there's all kinds of other things out there. And I really believe we're at the cutting edge here of being able to really, really grow and prosper because we are able to speak to that. There's a lot of companies like yours and mine that are okay being in the background, just sort of like, well, I'll wait for the phone to ring. What? I don't understand that. That's crazy. Yeah. Well, I would love if you would share what's a target customer for Vicki? What's a target? Are you looking for the smaller brands? Does it matter? Are you looking for somebody that, you mentioned the olive oil, somebody that needs a refresh? Who's your target client that you like to work with?
I like to work with what I call small to mid-sized brands, not the smallest startups. There's no money that, they've got to raise cash.
Thank you.
There's no budget there. And I have people like that call me a few times a year and I go, call me in a couple of years when you get to the next level because I'm overkill, right? It's too much. So I would say that small to mid-sized brands, when I've worked for the largest brands, I've entered through a large converter because they hired me and I'm
so smart
going under the guise of them because
smart.
I can't get in.
I'm with you. So smart. Love it. Yeah. And I see that too, Vicki, and the fact that, sometimes we're an afterthought, but if we're connected to a bigger company in some way, shape or form that already has that relationship, and I see this huge opportunity in my world, there's a lot of the packaging resellers, and I don't know if you, in your world with graphic design, deal with some of these colossal Veritivs or Crown packaging, but they cut their teeth selling commodity packaging, They sell everything from bubble wrap all the way down, but they're dealing with Cleveland Clinic and Moen Faucets and Kohler. And I'm out here saying, guys, have you approached the Cleveland Clinic about their medical packaging? What? What do you call that? Okay. Yeah, we sell them bubble wrap and pallets, but and so part of this is like you do, educating, holding their hand, encouraging them. You can do this. Bring me in there with you. I can help you. And that really is that, you're doing exactly what I want to be able to do, is to kind of partner or bolt on to those larger people because they're already in those places.
They are. They're already in. And typically what I add is this level of design expertise, because often when I go in, they don't have, even converters who have designers on staff, they're not the same type of designer. And I'm not going to say to anybody they're not a designer. I'm just going to say it's a different kind of designer. Pre-press designers are different than what I do. They can't create a brand identity. They can't do a line extension the way that I can and think about the consumer and the user experience of that shopper the way that I think about it. And that's really what it takes. And so, I think that would be one of the types of clients that I work with. The other thing that I would say that I work really well with is not a one and done, but a continued relationship. And that's because I have always been of the mindset that I can go into any industry and learn it. You're going to educate me. But once I learn it, there's that steep learning curve. Then you made the investment. Just keep me on, because now I'm understanding your competition. I'm understanding your customer and your audience. I'm understanding your business better and the goals. And so I will help you continue to grow in all of that design work.
Do you find that, and I didn't interrupt her, but do you find that in your place in this unique compared to other people? You know how you were saying, like when you work with a brand or you work with a company, I should say, and you're not a one trick pony. You're not just in there because, well, I sell film and I design film only. You take this and, holistic look, at what they've done in the past, what the market, what the competitors are using, what the industry has accepted. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
And that's different.
Yeah, I think it's different for someone who works on their own like I do.
Yeah.
I don't think it's different for certain design agencies. So I always felt like I was competing with a design agency, even though they never thought I was competing with them. I did. I mean, that was my standard. My standard was not competing with them. They're just getting this customers getting something different.
Right.
That works for some customers and not for other customers.
Right.
So I think if someone were to call me a freelancer, I would say, yes, it's highly unusual what I'm doing.
Yes.
Because they're doing just certain project work, a lot of execution. And one of the things that I learned early on is that to make myself indispensable to a brand, I needed to be more than just executing. It was the thought process and the strategy behind what I was doing that related to their growth and their sales, not just, hey, let's rebrand. I think this will help brand awareness. There's not a direct connection to top line. And I always wanted to have something that could have a direct connection to top line, which is how I eventually leaned into packaging. I mean, packaging was one of those things where I already think in 3D. Yeah. Which, as a creative person, some people think 2D, some people think 3D. I was always better at sculpture than I was at painting. I didn't grow up a drawer. I grew up building things and making things and using my hands. So I liked it. I didn't pursue packaging really until maybe 10, 12 years ago. Wow. Before that, I was just a generalist designer. And then it's one of those lean in things. I did some work for HP. It was helping them sell their do some design that would help sell their packaging, their labels and packaging equipment. So their folding carton equipment, their rolls, their label equipment. And so I was designing a lot of packaging. Then I did the work for WS. It's all leaning in.
Well, you said something that was really profound too, and I know you didn't mean to say this, but you wanted to become indispensable. And that to me is something that I try to tell our reps and the people that are up and coming is become indispensable, especially in our world. And that means finding somebody or finding a company's pain point. Don't be afraid. So many people in my space that I've seen over the last 15, 20 years, they want to just do a deal. And like, okay, hold on one second. Doing a deal, one and done, doesn't make you indispensable. Doing a deal and making a couple of shekels is not building yourself up for a career. And so much of that knowledge that you, like you say, is leaning in, I think of it the same way. It's like, go for the pain point. How can you become that trusted, indispensable partner for them that they go, call Vicki. She'll help us. She knows. And that to me is that it's like the bar of gold. Because at the end of the day, then you've got a customer really until that customer moves on for life. But the point is that that's what's missing, at least in my eyes, in the specialized packaging space. I don't know what you're
and what you're describing is relational, like it's relational sales. And I'm actually really good at that. Like when I said I'm not good at top of the funnel, I'm good at the relationship part. So I've had clients that I've had for 10 years.
Right.
A client now that I've had for 6 or 7 years. I have clients that come back to me, or if they don't have another project, they recommend me to somebody because it's not transactional to me. And I think part of that is personality.
100%. Agreed.
And that's just not how I relate to people.
Right. Yeah. And you can tell that would come across really, really not sincere, along those lines. And you could tell that it's just sort of like, when they're talking to you, they're seeing you, you're seeing them. And you're like, okay, where are we going with this versus the how quick can I work with this so I can make a couple of bucks? Like, no, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Well, I know that you've got a hard stop here, and I want to make sure I give you time so we land this plane, because I'd love to be able to do this again because there's so many different tentacles that we put together. But where do you see, and I know it's a very broad stroke, but if you were looking out into the design space, into the design, graphic design, package design, wherever you want to kind of, what would you do? You have a magic wand to go out there. Would you, for a younger you, to say, here's where I would focus? Anything out there that you just would throw out there and just say, look, if I was getting into this space and I was going to do it all over again, and with what I know now, anything, what would you throw out there?
It's a great question. And we didn't touch on this. I think you mentioned it. I didn't get a chance to talk about it. I do advise young people because I'm teaching at Tulane University now.
Yeah,
I'm teaching
love
packaging design class.
Nice.
And one of the things I've noticed about my students, and one of the things that I advise them, is to go live in the real world.
Nice.
Because what I have found, and what I found in teaching, is that they are so entrenched in the online world that even when it comes to using X-Acto knives, they're just not as experienced. And packaging, the reason that packaging is the most important touch point is it's in our real world. It's physical. We touch it. We interact with it. We use it. It sits in our pantry. We go and we grab it again. It's on my vanity counter. I put the cream on again.
I know.
So I would tell young people to go live in the real world, and all of those experiences in the real world help inform what you do creatively.
Right.
And then touching back on what you just said about being indispensable, it's the thought process. So as much as AI is coming for us, there needs to be a professional supervising and monitoring that creative that's created in AI.
Yep. I totally get that. And I think it's so spot on too, especially with the young people because they desperately need to be encouraged. It's okay. If there's anything that drives me crazy is we live in a world that seems to be adverse to failure or adverse to skinning their knees and getting their nose bloodied. No, 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 no. That's how we learn. That's how you go out there and make those mistakes. And we got your back. But so, unfortunately, in the world that we live in out here in the business world, it's like, oh, he failed. He made a mistake. So did Henry Ford about 6 times, or Walt Disney. I mean, come on. And that's something that's out there. And if there's anything I could throw out to the young people is don't be afraid to fail. That's how we're going to get there. But
yeah. Now, I mean, getting totally separate on a personal note, but one of the ways I raised my children was it's okay to make mistakes. I mean, the stake of the mistake gets higher the older that they get.
Correct.
Because when you're 5, you make a mistake and you skinned your knee. And when I always told my kids once they turned 18, the stakes are higher. You
Big
make
time.
mistakes, stakes are higher. You're 18. You sign something, it's legal. You make a mistake and you're not a child, right?
Yes, exactly.
But you can't be afraid. It is how we learn. And it's difficult as a parent, and you know this, to watch your kid make a mistake. But you have to sometimes do that because that is how they will learn.
100%. And then just let it go and stand by and just kind of hold their hand and you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay.
There was a book when I was raising my kids, there was a book that was doing the circles in Atlanta called The Blessings of a Skinned Knee. And it was an excellent book.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, Vicki, this was a thrill for me. Thank you very much. And I would like to do this. I would like to do this again, follow back up. Again, this is really, really cool. So thank you very much for taking the time. And
thanks for having me. And if you want to reach out, you can find me on my website at vickistrull.com or follow me, as we said, on LinkedIn. I post every single day.
You go, girl. You got it. Thank you. See you. Have a good day. Hi, everyone. It's David Marinak. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want to see more, here's another video that you can check out, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Thanks.